Flyover State of Film was shot in front of a live studio audience.
Welcome back, guys, to another episode of a FlyBy conversation. That's right. We're back. Brian and I had so much fun with American Graffiti / Dazed and Confused. If you haven't watched it, go back there and watch it. Then we decided to come back and do another one. How you doing, Brian?
Good. Yeah, you're like doing a classic, doing a newer one. That's kind of our thing now. We've done it a couple times in a row.
We stumbled upon a formula.
Oh, quick, give it a name and make it a whole separate podcast. That's what we do now.
Yeah.
I'm calling out Joe. That was a Joe call out.
If you're new to the channel and you're stumbling upon, because we're discussing two classics in my eyes, we usually have two more penises with us talking over each other, but this is our side project where we just sit down and just talk about two movies that we pair up either through common themes or common genres. Or if you're Joe and me, through common shitty actors that we love, which is go watch the Nick Cage. He's not a shitty actor, but he's done a lot of shitty movies.
But like, yeah, he doesn't let his talent keep him from doing some trash.
Yeah, yeah, he doesn't let his wallet,
mm-hmm.
emptying out. But yeah, so this time around,
they gotta pay me.
Yeah. We've been doing this for 3 years, and I've noticed that as different as Brian and me are, we have like core love for certain things, and that is martial arts movies, WWF, Attitude Era, and Westerns. For some reason, we're right there.
Well, I wanted to say this is actually a place where I feel like I feel like kind of a... I don't want to lead anybody on. I'm actually not as familiar with older Westerns as I should be. My Western love started like with movies like Tombstone when I was a kid. So like most of the Westerns I love are some modern Westerns, and I am that's always been a blind spot for me. I need to go back and like revisit, especially like some of the Clint Eastwood stuff, specifically. But like, I didn't want to give anybody the wrong impression. I do love Westerns, and there's some really classic ones. I feel like it's like a dead genre sort of, but it's actually like a genre that like it produces diamonds. It's so hard to get a hit Western that like the pressure creates these perfect little gems that only pop up like every 6 years or so. Anyway, that's why I've been thinking about it.
but Logan is like a Western, but no, it's not.
Now, it's funny, people say that, but then, like, unironically, a movie like No Country for Old Men is, like, a great modern Western. It's so good. Like...
But yeah, so we decided to do, because there's this movie that we think, and even though we hate this word, it's underrated. 100% is underrated. And that is the Sister Brothers.
Just not ever like picked up much of a following that I'm aware of. Like I don't see any cult love for it brewing anywhere except between literally me and you. I mean, the people I have talked to who watched it have all liked it, but it doesn't. I don't know. It resonates really hard with me, and I noticed it again this time. Like
it's a banger. It's such a good movie. But like we said, we stumbled upon a formula. The show is gonna be called the Old and the New. There you go. Put a graphic up. So we watch.
I was thinking about the Dumb and the Restless.
we can interchange titles any moment throughout the episodes. So we paired it with since the sister brothers is this duo, even though they're brothers in this one, but it's essentially a Western duo, life of crime, set out to do one mission to possibly escape the life. So it kind of paired perfectly with a freaking classic, and I'm just gonna introduce it right off the bat, which is Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, based on true story. 1969 American Western.
I watched an A&E biography today. Just
really?
No.
Did you the photos? There's some photos out there. Let's hit pause real quick. And I love that they used the photos of them in real life to do the costumes. Like there's a lot of real photos of them, and where we can see Paul Newman and Robert Redford dressed identically like them, which was very good.
Although they never have Paul Newman wearing the mustache, and like one of the main pictures of Butch as that you see, he's got the big broom handle looking deal. But I get that they did it to differentiate them so they would look different, so it wouldn't just be two guys with mustaches talking to each other. I understand.
Yeah. So directed by.
Plus, when you got Paul Newman face, you don't cover it up.
Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't cover up Robert Redford either. I would do.
I don't know. The Jeremiah Jones beard says otherwise. Come on, it looks pretty good.
So, directed by George R. Hill. I think he did a few other classics,
he's a real
like
collaborator.
20 Farm.
Yeah, collaborator with
The Sting.
Yeah, Sting, and I can't remember, there were a couple of them. Oh, Slapshot. He did Slapshot also.
Yeah. So he has a
couple Paul Newman movies.
Yeah, and also directed by William Goldman. I believe he is also from The President's Men, so he and The Sting as well. So it's kind of like
written by William Goldman.
Yeah, written.
You said directed again. It's okay.
Sorry.
I didn't want your mistake to go by without you recognizing it. So
yeah, and he also wrote the novel The Princess Bride. Yeah, so fun facts. So like we said, the movie stars Paul Newman as Butch and Robert Redford as the Sundance Kid. And also Etha is played by Catherine Ross, which is like the love interest, kind of quasi-romance friendship with all of them, with both of them.
She's like a member of the team, and she's kind of romantically involved with Sundance. Yeah. Oh, by the way, I just wanted to say I only realized or learned about the connection between Sundance, as in Robert Redford, and the Sundance Film Festival, and like how he was involved in that, like a couple years ago, like an embarrassingly short amount of years ago.
Yeah.
I didn't have to admit that, but it's one of those things that's.
I thought you did, but you did. That's awesome. He's one of the founding fathers of the festival, so it's kind of awesome. But yeah, so we pick up like later in their lives. They're already well established. They have a huge following of warrants and debts, and everybody wants them dead, and
if you want,
everybody
quick,
fears.
Just so we're clear, this is like the last couple years of Butch and Sundance's life. Butch and Sundance died when they were about the same age, about a year apart. They were in like their mid to late 40s when they passed. Filming of the movie, Newman was 44, Robert Redford was 33. So just so you get an idea of what they're, because as I was watching it, I was thinking, I was like, man, I can't believe they didn't cast younger. If they made this movie now, they would cast younger. And now you realize that it's like, oh, that's part of it. This is the last hurrah. And they're actually, I still believe that Hollywood today would cast younger, but the correct thing to do is cast men of the proper age.
But I wouldn't have, like, I'm not saying that he looks young, but I wouldn't have placed Newman in the 44s. Yeah. Like, he looks good for 44.
Yeah,
especially back then.
Look weathered enough to be men. They don't look like a couple of fresh-faced teens out there running around.
For sure. So they're, like I said, they're in their later years. They're forced to escape the United States because the owner of the train of the Union stations have placed a huge bounty, and there's like a legit team, like the Avengers of the team.
That's what I have this note. I was like, show me the movie about the train baron
Yes.
putting together his like sick ass team of lawmen and trackers to like find Butch Cassidy and Sundance. That's dope.
And also,
like I would watch. I know that's like a pro capitalism kind of stance to take, but come on, that's cool.
Well, they kind of did the same thing with so Bonnie and Clyde, they destroyed this entire world supposedly, and they did a movie about them. And then a few years ago, Kevin Costner did a movie about the policeman that hunted them down.
Yeah, it's on Netflix, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, it sucked, but that's kind of like the same pitch.
Yeah.
Reversed. But yeah, so they're being hunted down, and they go down to Bolivia. They try to go straight, and then things just go sideways from there. And essentially, we just follow their friendship, and that's what I kind of wanted to start with. It's like their chemistry and their banter is so entertaining. It's so good. I did not expect the comedy of this movie.
Redford does a lot, like. He really holds back, but when he hits a line, it's so, you know what I mean? He almost always has a great little one-liner or comeback.
Yeah.
Almost everything he says. Newman's obviously the talker of the two.
Oh, Newman is just firing out all cylinders.
But that's what they said. I tried, like I said, I want to check out that A&E thing, so I was like, to see what people said about him, and supposedly it was like that. Butch was very charming. He was a very likable person. They used to mesh with society a lot, and when their trip down to Bolivia, when we were to your favorite part where they have the montage, they play the Burt Bacharach music, which Burt Bacharach, wild choice. I feel like that's like your Cat Stevens for Harold and Maude, only but they were they really took a swing with Burt Bacharach during the movie, during the music.
I was watching it with my wife, and that and the bike montage. My wife was like, "What is happening in this movie?" And I was like, I love it so much because back then people took swings. That was the swing. Absolutely. The director said, "You know what? I want a bike montage. I want them doing tricks." Butch Cassidy was the first BMXer in the entire world.
That scene, the bike scene and the raindrops, that's the only thing I knew from this movie. That's all I remembered from this movie. Going into awesome. It. This is one of my mom's favorite movies, but I had never sat down to watch it. My mom was probably 13 or 14 when this came out, so she's probably swooning over this one, and always one of her faves. But I never really fully got into it, and to sit down to watch that, the raindrop scene was something I always knew about, and didn't realize how early it came kind of in the movie.
Yeah. But what I wanted to say, one of the things that really captured me and I really enjoyed was that ode to old movies. Like the opening credits was this silent movie. It was so wonderful to watch. Honestly, it was so much fun because now it's not so much. The opening credits back then were so long and so tedious.
All the stuff that's at the end now was at the beginning back then.
So that was very smart to do a small silent movie while the credits are playing.
I really like the way you have that opening scene in sepia, so it feels like, and then they ride out of that and they ride into color, and it's a very film literate way of being here's what you've seen, now we're going to do something different. We're going to do a different kind of Western that's something unlike you've seen this, so let's try something else. And I just love that little bit of film grammar that that felt really cool.
And they do a lot of the classic tropes of the playing with the shadows, so only the eyes are very focused, and it was very well filmed. And I like
Newman's eyes look like they glow in sepia tone. They're so bright.
And I love the introduction of them. Because right off the bat, you're like, okay, this is the killer, and this is the talker. Because right off the bat, he's the one talking the other guy down that wants to go at it with Bush, and Bush is just staring him down. Kid is staring him down. You're like, okay, you fully understand the dynamic of them right off the bat.
But then when you get them together alone, you see that Sundance is a lot more like Butch. He's got that funny side to him. He's got a much more stoic facade, but when he lets his guard down, he is kind of a more free, a freewheeling kind of guy. I had that same note. Did you know the big guy who he gets in when they come back and they challenge? That's Lurch from the classic Addams Family, the show.
I wanted to look him up because something in his face reminded me of somebody.
He reminded me of the big giant dude from from Happy Gilmore.
That's the one. That's
right.
The one,
it's not him. It's the guy who played Lurch.
And that gave me, and also I wrote it. I think I wrote it in Twitter. Follow us on Twitter. I love it.
Twitter.
Indiana Jones. It has so much energy of Indiana Jones, especially that fight sequence where he just kicks him in the balls instead of just shooting him.
Gives him that double axe handle and just drills him. It's so funny.
And it was funny that he whispers to Kid, like, if I lose this fight, you make sure you kill him.
Oh, that's so good. I love the practical explosion on the train. I was like, how did somebody not get hurt during that?
I legit screamed. My wife was throwing something away, and I had to back it out. And I was like, you have to watch this. Somebody died. Somebody died while typing.
That's another thing I was gonna say. The classic, not really a moment I was more familiar with through pop culture was where they jump into the river. You know, the kind of like the big jump, and I was like, that's real stuntmen jumping in a real river, riding real rapids. You could break your hips, you break your wrists, you get fucked up riding rapids like that against you get slammed against some rocks. I was like, that's some badass stuff right there.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stunts and a lot of good classic cowboy riding. I love a good, horse sequence where you can tell that they're like going up hills and like they're really working
the chase, the chase in the first half before they go to Bolivia, the long chase is a really good one because I like, they're trying all their different little tricks on how to throw guys off and everything, and
it really does.
At the end, they're walking that poor horse up the mountain. And I was like, damn, that they are really moving. They're like,
just let him go. But yeah, I love that they have a good handle on tension. Like I'm not saying that was tense, but they knew how to build the suspense of like, are they gonna get away with it? Like, because the old man sequence is fun, and then they right away you're like, okay, then they escape, and then they come back, and then the horse split, and then they come back, and so you go like, all right, we're going to the rocks, and then we're still following.
They cannot be stopped.
I
love them mythologizing who they think is on the team, the super team, and I mean they never like fully confirm that that's those guys, but it's pretty good stuff. Like I always love a good hero or a villain qualifier, where another group, like somebody is talking about how badass somebody else is and they describe them to you. I always love that. That's a fun little movie trope to get out some exposition,
And when they said the Indian's name, the Native American name, his name is Lord Baltimore.
Yeah.
But I understood Lord Voldemort, and I was like, what?
That'd be amazing. Honestly, amazing crossover. Let's do this.
Yeah. Funny. But I think the names that they throw out there are based on real life. Like they actually build a team similar to that. So that's why they were throwing those names out. Kind of like Winks and Nas had the history buffs. Another thing that I loved about the movie was the random score. Like it just kept you on your toes.
Oh yeah, like I said, Burt Bacharach coming in for multiple numbers. Like just he didn't just do the piano score for like when they're having an adventure. He pops in with some jams like during the montage we were talking about with the sepia tone pictures, and then like I said the raindrop scene where they're just fully. I mean, Sam Raimi calls that up. That's a scene in Spider-Man 2. He does the raindrops thing with when Peter gives up being Spider-Man.
Yeah. But so, what do you want to get to the end, or do you still want to talk something? Oh, something that I saw that made me Google. Now that I'm just asking about the beginning, like when they're in the brothel and they're drinking beer, when the mob is outside when they're trying to form the mob, which is hilarious.
Yeah, they're trying to. I love the dude who hijacks the mob to try to sell bikes. It's like, well, you gathered everybody here, so I'm just gonna hop up, sell a bike.
but they were drinking beers out of a legit bucket. Like they had a bucket full of beer and
Yeah,
they would
like
throw
bucket of
it.
beers, they would like pour. They'll use like a big scoop, or they scoop the cup in or whatever.
Yeah. And I was Googling, and that's kind of like, yeah, that's kind of like the origin of what we sell now, bucket of beers, where they put those beers inside of a legit bucket. That's how back then they used to serve before the pitcher was the bucket, which was kind of cool.
Yeah, we can wrap up pretty quick. I had a couple notes about, excuse me, about Etta James, the character, the female lead.
Yeah.
Really the only female character in the whole movie. They do treat her pretty well overall, though. She's a strong woman. She makes up her own mind. Although I feel bad for her when she's like, well, I'm an old maid of 26, so I've got no choice but to go on the run with two outlaws and like patch their wounds and make them meals and shit. I was like, oh, honey, like, just maybe give it a minute.
You have your entire life ahead of you.
Yeah, like that's.
I'm just
rough.
a teacher with nobody to love me. What am I gonna do? Like, I mean, you have a house and you have a job.
Yeah, you already have a house. You're like, yeah, I don't know. But then I liked that they have the scene where right before, like, she's kind of trying to talk about what their future could be once they get away, like once they get out of Bolivia and kind of get back to the States, and Butch is kind of shooting her down, and that's when she realizes that he's kind of already resigned himself, that they're not gonna make it.
Yeah.
Like, no matter what, this is only gonna end one way. And like, whereas he used to kind of, I think he used to kind of think of that as a joke, it's kind of reached him finally, and he's kind of, and I like that. And on that A&E biography, they talk about Etta James, real person, but she is kind of lost to history. She did go down with them to Bolivia. They actually lived there a little longer. They actually they ranched for like 6 or 7 years before they got back into robbing. That's a thing that got, cut down for the movie, obviously. But, and then they did go back, but she kind of leaves and nobody really knows what happened to her, and she's lost to history. Nobody ever, there's no real word about whatever happened to Etta James after that.
Maybe she met a nice Bolivian man and settled down because she knew Spanish. That was another sequence that was pretty funny, them trying to learn Spanish.
Yeah, them teaching. They're trying to teach.
Trying to rob people. And one thing that I've always loved about classic movies, like maybe since the 40s till easily the 70s, late 70s, is that if somebody's speaking Spanish, they're actually Spanish-speaking people. Yeah. Like they don't have like a thick ass accent of like somebody that grew up in the States, and they're like, you look Latino enough. Do you know Spanish? And you're like, is it gonna give me the job? Because
I'll say whatever I need to.
I'll talk Spanish. But yeah, especially and there's a few jokes in there because they don't put subtitles, and I have some financial appreciation.
Which I like as a non-Spanish speaker. I like when a movie kind of drops you in like that and is like, well, they don't know what's being said, so you don't get to know what's being said.
Exactly. Because there was a lot of banter when they were like saying about the payroll. They're like, that is they were saying like, it's not our money, and the Spanish people were saying, yeah, it's our money now.
It's our money now. Yeah, exactly.
We know it's not your
money. But I think it's also well directed enough that I picked up on most of the context clue there. Like, I was like, I get what's happening in this scene.
So one thing about, you probably saw it in the A&E thing, is that in the movie they go out in a blaze of glory, but in real life they kill each other.
Well, Sundance, they say he got shot, and he gets pulled in, and then Butch Cassidy finished himself off, I think. And then there are some, like Billy the Kid, like every other. Survive. Right, there's always a rumor that they survive. There's people who say they saw them, and you never know. They could just be getting hustled by some huckster. I tend to believe that when you find a dude who's famous and he's got a bullet in his head, you probably got the right guy.
I mean, yeah, and also especially back then when there was no, way to prove an identity, probably some schmuck in the farthest corner of the world claiming to that legend, to be that legend.
Honestly, hustle like that literally up until like the late 80s, early 90s. It's wild. Like, you could just move to a different area, and that was enough to people just like, oh, I guess you're just a new person now.
Yeah.
So
I don't need documentation. I don't know who you are.
I love when the army, when the military, the Bolivian military rolls up or whatever, and they're like, 2 guys. He's like, it's the Banditos Yankee. And they're like, oh, Okay, well, fair enough. And to be fair, Butch and Sundance lay out quite a few bodies in their wake. You know, when Butch says he's never shot somebody, I was like, I do not believe you.
I've never shot somebody in a while.
Yeah, I haven't shot somebody in a long time. Maybe maybe I buy into that.
But yeah, fantastic movie. I understand why it's beloved. There's some argument to maybe trim it down a little bit, but I wouldn't change it.
It's under 2 hours though, so that's fair as far as I'm concerned.
There's now
I will, as we start to like shift over to Sisters Brothers, I want to talk for just a second something that is kind of a criticism of Butch and Sundance, I guess, in a way. I watched Sisters Brothers first because I am very familiar with it, and there's some themes in it that I think are really interesting about the nature of relationships between men and how they relate to each other, and like that. And I was hoping to kind of contrast what's in Sisters Brothers with what's in Butch and Sundance, and I feel like Butch and Sundance is a little lacking in that area. There's no real depth to, like, their relationship is very, what you see is what you get when you're watching Butch and Sundance. Everything, like, not to say that they don't have a deep relationship between the two of them, but like it's kept fairly light through the movie. They don't do much to scratch past the surface. Great performances, and you can tell they obviously, it's well played. They care about each other. They know each other very well. But like, I was hoping to kind of compare and contrast some of that, what's in the Sisters Brothers compared to that, and also elements of like midlife crisis, men kind of trying to find a second, kind of almost a second career and like reinvent themselves and change direction.
I kind of perked up when in the opening sequence they Bush says like, let's go to Bolivia. There's like it's essentially the new California. And like, oh, this is pretty much, Jake Gyllenhaal and Riz Ahmed, that quest for a new life through gold. And I was like, all right, well, at least there's like a very clear comparison that we can make. But then it's like, nope, that's just a line that they said.
Yeah, well, and I feel like and again, I'm not trying to take anything away. I feel like Butch and Sundance is a very straightforward last ride movie. These are guys at the end of their illustrious careers, and they're dealing with that. But I feel like Sisters Brothers is also that, but also has quite a bit going on under the surface too, as far as the relationships between Riz Ahmed and Jake Gyllenhaal, and between the actual brothers, Eli and Charlie, and played by Joaquin Phoenix and John C. Reilly, which amazing pairing. And I'm not even a huge Joaquin guy. I mean, I recognize his talent, obviously, but I'm not like running out to, I'm not burning out to go see Joaquin Phoenix movies for the most part. But he's incredible in this.
Yeah, he's a fantastic actor. So yeah, let's switch gears. 2018, we're jumping quite a few years into the future.
I didn't see it till early 2019, but it retroactively became my favorite movie of 2018.
Yeah. I saw it in a completely empty theater, and I enjoyed mine. 2018 Western crime drama, directed by, I'm gonna butcher his name, Jacques Audiard. Sorry, my dude. I love you. Thank you for a great movie. You're a French director, so I'm gonna say Jacques. Sorry.
Jacques. Maybe it's just Jacques.
Jacques. It has an S. He's the director of Rust and Bone. That's a great Catherine Cotillard movie.
It's another movie I have not seen, and this is based on a book I have not read also.
Yes. Written by a dude that probably hasn't done anything outside of the French cinema scene, so I haven't seen any of his movies. But his name is Thomas Bidegain. Again, two French dudes killed on Western movies, so I'm happy. That was so fun. Starring John C. Reilly, Joaquin Phoenix playing the Sister Brothers, and also Jake Gyllenhaal, which is like a scout for the boss of the brothers.
The Commodore, played by Rutger Hauer. Sort of.
Yeah, and Riz Ahmed, who is like a scientist.
Yeah, he's like a chemist or an alchemist almost. Like, he's basically come up with a secret formula, which we later find out is a thing to help find gold.
Yes. Essentially, the two brothers are hired guns, but they have like let's say a permanent contract with the Commodore.
They're kind of like hitmen for the Commodore. They work for him.
So they're essentially, they tell them to go either kill this man or get me the money or get me whatever they stole.
And the dynamic Eli is a little bit older, and you can tell he's kind of done with the life, like right from the beginning.
C. Reilly.
He is John C. Reilly, and then Charlie, the younger brother, which is Joaquin Phoenix, a little more ambitious. Like maybe wants to kind of not only keep going, but rise up the ranks a little bit.
Yeah, he's very dead set in living his life in the crime. Like, this is what I want to do.
Yeah,
There's nothing else.
And to be fair, it's what the Sisters Brothers are like almost clearly born to do. They have like a supernatural ability to create death and destruction effortlessly. Like just
tell that to the 6 horses that they burn in the beginning.
Well, okay. Well, I said destruction also.
Exactly, yeah. So they're exactly, they know what they're doing. So essentially, they're set out on a mission to track down Jake Gyllenhaal, who is tracking down Riz Ahmed.
Jake Gyllenhaal's supposed to find the guy, and then he lets them know where to come, and then they come and get him, kill him, or bring him back and torture him, and get whatever they want.
Yeah. So, like Brian said, there's kind of this back and forth between the brothers, and like one is very tired and is looking to how the world is evolving. Like honestly, the best scenes are John C. Reilly and a toothbrush. Those are my favorite scenes. And
there's a really cool element of this that actually is kind of in Butch Cassidy too, and I didn't realize that whole like the end of it's not just their last ride, it's also the world of the Wild West is coming to an end.
The bike, it represents that.
Right, exactly, the bike. But we get like an even accelerated version of that. It starts with the toothbrushing, obviously, but you get when they go into San Francisco and you see like what an actual city is at this time.
Yeah.
It's really like the difference between the way they're living and like the way we're presented with Westerns and what was actually going on in like places at that time is very interesting. I think and it also like speaks to what we talked about as far as like them changing and like trying to move to a second part of their life.
Yeah, this plays out as well in Red Dead Redemption 2. Like most of the game you're playing like this deserts and tiny towns, and then suddenly you walk into New Orleans and you go like, oh, this is a city now.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's fun. So the brothers are tracking down Jake Gyllenhaal and Riz Ahmed. Jake Gyllenhaal befriends Riz Ahmed as they're traveling down the south to where Riz believes he can find the most gold. Then
I think it's interesting too that Riz, like they play Riz Ahmed kind of like he's like he seems like a genuinely nice guy, but he could also be a really good hustler, and you don't really know right away. You know what I mean? And like Jake Gyllenhaal just kind of gets taken in by him, and you're not sure if it's going to be legitimate because he's kind of he's a fast talker. He's a little more sophisticated than a lot of the people he runs into. Yeah, I like
that it was a flip from their personalities in Nightcrawler. So Nightcrawler, like Jake is the one that ropes in Riz, and this one Riz is the one that ropes in Jake. So like we're saying, Jake essentially lets his ambitions get to him. He doesn't want to be working for the Commodore anymore. He sees an opportunity to become rich with this new invention by Riz.
I hate to keep breaking in, but there's all these little things. There's like an element of confronting like generational wealth and generational abuse. He's rejecting the wealth of his father, but then when it comes time to serve his needs, he's kind of taking it on, and like I think that's a thing that a lot of people with money could recognize, like the idea of like I want to be my own person, but also I want to, but then this faster track is open to me. And and then the idea of the generational abuse thing. There's a great line that the sisters brothers, when they're talking about their dad, and he's like, they're like, his foul blood is in us. And, you know, I've had that thought as a person who has a bad relationship with their parent and their parent is a bad person, is like, that's in me. And I carry that, and I carry and I got to watch out for that in myself. And that idea of like confronting that and coming to terms with it and not letting it define who you are as a person is very interesting.
Yeah. And that can be also translated to, you know, genetics. They could have gotten his bipolar. They could have gotten his drunkenness, like his anger.
Absolutely.
Like those things easily translate through generations. Like some people use it as an excuse to be a drunk asshole, but others like rise above it. Kind of like John is trying to do in this movie.
Right, and whereas you know, Charlie Joaquin Phoenix is always giving into those baser instincts. He's getting drunk. He's killing people when he doesn't have to. He's, you know, being wantonly destructive, letting his greed overtake his judgment constantly, you know.
And it costs him a lot, like we'll see in the rest of the movie. So the sister brothers essentially track them down finally after Jake is, you know, giving them the rundown, so the runaround, trying to divert them from finding him. And after a few shots fired, the sister brothers come around, and they also want to be part of the gold chase. Things go sideways very badly, and I'm going to leave it at that, right? I'm not going to say the entire movie. So,
you don't want to give it all up, but
that's pretty much
because unfortunately there's going to be people who have definitely not seen the Sisters Brothers watching this.
Yeah,
because it doesn't seem like very many people have seen it.
They should. This is a fantastic movie. It was a box office bomb, grossing
I'm sure. No surprise
$13 million on a $40 million budget. But yeah, let's sidetrack a little bit. What is your favorite character? Let's start by that, because there's 4 fantastic characters in this movie.
Yeah, there's some interesting side characters. There's not a ton of them, but I was gonna say I'm a big fan of Mayfield. When they go into Mayfield and they go to Mayfield's Tavern, and then like everything, there's an interesting. That's a trans actress. Her name's Rebecca Root. Charlie misgenders her, but I don't think he's doing it I think it's kind of an inadvertent thing, because he's like, they're talking about everything's called Mayfield, and then she walks up and says, "I'm Mayfield," and he's like, the man of the house or whatever. I don't think he's doing it intentionally. I think that's a play. I think they put that in there like specifically to have him do that, to play off of that, which I think is interesting, because then when it's just him and Eli and they're walking up, he only refers to her as a woman. He's always talking about Mayfield as a woman, you know, and I was like, I feel like that's more of like a thing where they're kind of tiptoeing around it. I thought it was interesting, you know. But as far as the 4 main characters, I mean, your heart, it has to be John C. Reilly. He's everything. Like, he's the core of the movie. And like the ever-suffering Eli trying to come to terms with like a changing world and his changing views, and he's just been like this kind of burdened character his whole life. You get the impression he's basically just been cleaning up Charlie's messes for 40 years or something. Like,
yeah, like I alluded to, like the best scenes are him with a toothbrush, and it's at the same time like funny but heartbreaking when the sequence happens, because he's like this is what I can afford now as a step to like a better life. And then when he's like brushing his teeth in the river, and Jake Gyllenhaal sees him, and he's like, "Oh, look, I do it too. Like, I'm a sophisticated human." And he just like, okay, whatever. He just walks away. You can see like the defeat in his face. Like, I won't be accepted even if I make the full strive to be a modern man.
There's a lot of interesting things going on there with like him getting comfortable. Like I said, there's a lot of interesting underlying stuff going on in this movie about relationships between men, and like friendships between men, and what brotherhood means, and what like what responsibility do you carry for your family, and where do you draw that line of how much you tolerate and how much you put up with. I love the scene. He has a full-on Tony Soprano style panic attack when he's, and again, it's very Tony Soprano-esque because he only gets to really show emotion when he talks about his horse, Tim. God, his poor horse gets like attacked by a bear and then is suffering like the whole movie with this horribly wounded eye, and then finally like walks off a cliff. It's so grim. But like, he has a great moment there where he's like kind of opening up to Riz Ahmed a little bit, and just like the panic of admitting the truth to himself, of saying things out loud that he's only ever barely dared to think, probably. You know what I mean? It's an interesting dissection of what it means, what masculinity is, and what that means.
And also the debt that he feels he owes his brother.
Right.
Not only because it's his brother and like, he should care for him, but he was the one that eliminated this evil looming above them.
He feels responsible. He feels like it was his failing that his brother had to do it, and that what happened kind of awakened this like darkness in his brother that now he has to kind of stick around to keep an eye on.
Yeah, it is. There is a lot of layers to this movie, and on top of everything, like, we can keep digging in, and I want to talk about the actual gold sequences, which is a beautiful metaphor.
Yeah, should we throw up, when we get to that, we'll decide maybe we need to say spoilers or something. You don't want to give away. There are things I want to talk about, but I don't want to give the whole thing up, I guess.
But we've
haven't been that careful about it in any way, though, to be fair.
we've been romanticizing the movie, but at the same time, even if you don't want to like dig into these relationships and the metaphors for like American society or manhood or whatever the case you want to go, like, it's a fun Western. Like, there's fun action in it.
I don't want to make it seem like a boring slog of thoughtful shots of cornfields.
No.
It's a very, I want to bring this up. It's great, we can talk about here. The way the action is done in this movie, there's about maybe 5 or 6 action sequences, if you consider the last part of the movie, which is kind of an extended. But the action is always shot, aside from maybe I would say one scene, it's like almost very objective. They take a step back, and it's kind of like, it's not glamorized. Everything's very frank and brutal and fast, but like,
they miss a lot.
And also like, you don't always see what's happening. It's like this. You're an observer too. You're not always right in the action. A lot of movies put you right there. You're more of like a third party. So when they walk off into into some bushes and are like doing a pincer maneuver on some dudes, you don't necessarily see that. You just hear shots, and then maybe somebody stumbles out of the woods, and you're left to kind of. But it's an interesting way to do a lot. I really enjoyed that. There's a lot of good action out there right now, but I like the way it felt very real.
No, yeah, and also, I mean, obviously, we enjoy the Quick and the Dead type glamorized action sequences, but for the most part, Westerns are pretty straightforward in terms of their actions, and this one felt very true to the genre, but a little, I don't want to say the word gritty because it's not gritty, but a little more realistic in terms of like, toned down, still very well shot and good sound design. Like, the gunshots are fucking.
Instead of the camera getting in, the camera kind of, when action's about to happen, the camera sets itself, and it doesn't move till it's done. I guess maybe it reminds me of a kung fu movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're in one spot and you're watching what's happening.
What else, Brian?
Oh man, there's so much about this one. It's so
because
good.
Kind of like I was like. You said you didn't want spoilers, and I'm not like.
Okay, well, this isn't a spoiler. We can talk a little bit about this theory I kind of came up with as I was watching this.
Okay.
This is kind of a sneaky sci-fi fantasy movie, right? So like, the Riz Ahmed's creation is something that does not exist. It's something that is impossible. So you get your science fiction element there. You've got what I talked about a little bit before about the supernatural element of the Sisters Brothers, almost unkillable killing machines that seem to like take on groups of men with ease at all times. Like, I really like that
sequence in the end. That sequence in the end where John C. Reilly just obliterates So many people.
Well, also I like that
It's
part
so good.
too, because that's they get to a point where they're like, is there anybody even chase? Like, there's just no one left to even chase them. The Commodore has like no more dudes to even send. But
So good.
but also then I was okay, so I got that mindset, and I'm like, all right, that's kind of neat. That's kind of a fun little ride take on it. And I started thinking about how it's based on a book, and I was like, what if it was based on a graphic novel, actually? But then, so I'm watching Butch and Sundance, and with that in mind, they have the scene where he does the "Can I move?" You know, the guy does the like shooting thing, and he misses, and then but when he does his little movement, I was like, oh, so Sundance does bullet throwing like Wanted. You know what I mean? He has to kind of be in the, so it's like equilibrium, you know? He has to like get his gun kata going before he can shoot right. And I was like, all right, maybe I watched too many comic book movies.
That's so funny. But I'm gonna all right, let's do this. This is spoiler town.
Spoiler town. Boom.
This is if you've enjoyed the comments so far, thank you. Go subscribe, go watch the movies and come back. Spoilers.
If I didn't make it sound like a weird fucking, it sounds like I did make it sound like a French art film, didn't I? Like
yeah. I want to talk about the gold. So the gold sequence. The way that they easily portrayed how greed can consume man is so simple, it's so fast, and it's so gruesome at the same time. That is so well made, because like I said, you can enjoy the movie for what it is, or you can dig down. And obviously
and that's the thing, there is so much to like dig under the surface of this movie that I think, like, and that's why I didn't mean to want to take away from Butch and Sundance, because I do feel like that's a great movie with a great portrayal of a relationship, but there's just so much going on in Sisters, Brothers. Like, I had the same idea, but I hadn't heard it put the way, like, where you crystallize it there about greed and man, and like even the idea that when they pour the solution into the water, you can gather your money, but if you gather too much, you get hurt. You need to get out and cleanse yourself for a minute, get away, and then you can go back to work. Like, even that element has its own underlying kind of tone to, like, it's about, it's all about control and patience, and like, don't overdo it, don't go too far, don't overconsume,
Don't take more than you need. Yeah. Don't take shortcuts. And then in come the Sister Brothers, and Charlie goes like, fuck it.
And Charlie, who gives into his worst instincts on it's like, honestly, at this point in the movie, you're like worried every time he has an interaction with somebody. You're like, he's gonna fuck this up and shoot him. Like when he's talking to Jake Gyllenhaal when they're like in the bathing hole after a long day, and you're just like, most people have been around somebody in their life where you're worried like the wrong thing could just set them off to a point where it's scary. And Joaquin Phoenix is that guy like all the time in this movie. You do not want, so you're always you're on edge that he's going to do the wrong thing anyway. And then everything's going so well, and you're there like, they're finding all this gold, and you find out that this is where you basically find out the solution's real, like that it actually works and whatever. And they're finding all this gold, and they're all excited. And then, and then he goes and fucks it all up. And then when he dumps too much in the water, and then when they fall into it, you're just like, oh, his arm is like melting off and shit. It's grim.
It's so grim. And
that's another thing that made this movie feel like a fantasy movie, where it kind of like
body horror,
like a body horror. It kind of went to a different genre.
Yeah. And when they cut his arm, also, is so visually, like,
maybe the most gruesome movie
it felt real.
Dances with Wolves. Like, it's a rough one.
Yeah, it felt so real. And then, is it his gun arm? I can't remember now.
No, I don't think so. I think he can still shoot a gun.
He can still shoot a gun because he
has trouble riding. I remember when he's struggling with like controlling the reins with one arm.
Yeah, because at first, like, I was like, okay, they're gonna take away his power. Like, his only way is to kill, but he still kills with this, like, because he's a fucking.
So. But by that time, John C. Reilly, like, basically all the Commodore's dudes are chasing him down, and John C. Reilly has been like single-handedly just laying waste to like groups of guys. The ones who come and show up when Eli's like just got his arm amputated in the town, because that's the guy that Eli says he's gonna partner with. He's like, I'll just go and I'll partner with Rooster or whatever that guy's name is. And that when Eli says he's gonna leave the life, and they kind of have a little tiff about it.
Yeah.
And then that guy is the first one to show up after they just amputated, and like he can't even get Charlie to like get off the table and hide behind something. He's just like, no, I don't fuck, no, I'd rather die or whatever. And then he goes out and just mows down this group of guys. And it's like I said, that's what makes me think they're almost supernatural. Like they were just destined to be killers. He's just like so casual about like walking around and pop, bang. You know what I mean? It's just like second nature to him. He's been doing so long, and like that kind of feeling of, oh, you're not gonna kill me. I've been through this a million times. It's not gonna happen. Yeah. You're not the guy.
And I love that they like show this amazing sequence of like every single fucking person dying, and they reach the Commodore, and the French director / French writers go like, nope, you're not getting a satisfying ending of shootout like you thought. The Commodore
you're
has
not
been
getting a big revenge, Jules and Vincent shooting the guys in the hotel or whatever,
But the funniest happened. No, you know what? You know what I can compare this sequence to is what Quentin Tarantino wrongfully did in the Django Unchained. Like he had this huge shootout in the mansion, like this climax of a sequence, which kind of drags, if I'm being honest.
It's real fun for a minute, and then you're like, we're still doing this?
Yeah. And then he gets captured, and the balls penis thing happened, and
he comes back and does more killing.
Yeah, and you go like, oh, but we already. And then in this movie, you have this huge climax, and it fucking ends, and you go like,
the climax is the scene right before that where Eli and Charlie are talking, and Charlie decides he wants to kill the cop. Like he's he's ready to turn the corner, but for Charlie that still means killing, but it means killing someone else. It doesn't mean killing for the Commodore anymore, or becoming the Commodore, which he was kind of had on his mind. He wants to go back and just end it, and that's the climax of the movie. Him and his brother coming together and realizing through all this, they found him finally kind of realizing what Eli means and what's really important. That's the climax of the movie. And then you get a great scene where they are the only people who showed up at the Commodore's funeral. Because it's like the Grinch, it's like the Ebenezer Scrooge thing. Nobody cares that he died. He was probably a horrible piece of shit who dominated the town. And also all his dudes got murdered.
But the funniest moment of the entire movie is when Eli just punches the corpse, just making sure he's dead.
I love the morticians are like, hey. It's like that's probably a thing they had not experienced before.
And then they have this beautiful moment where they just return to home to their mom, and they're just gonna.
And their mom is Carol Kane. Fuck yeah, that's awesome.
That is.
I remember the first time I watched it, I was like, "What? Surprise, Carol Kane!"
That's great casting. Great casting.
I love. She's like, "I'll kill," and she's like, threatens to kill him. And then even when she knows it's her sons, she's like, What's the deal? I can't have any of your bullshit."
Yeah. But yeah, it's such a good movie. I fully recommend it. Like I said, I saw it in an empty theater, and I was so ecstatic watching it, completely alone.
I mean, it's one of those movies that when I first saw it, I was blown away by it. You know what I mean? There's movies that are good and you enjoy, and there's movies that you barely look up fun, or something. It's just doesn't catch you. And this one, I was just like, wow, I don't know what it is about this story, but it's got I just felt such a deep connection to it, and there's so much packed into it.
And 2 hours, and it flies by. It just flies. Yeah. At least for me, it flies. Two good movies. Fully recommend. We're not rating, right? Do we rate?
No, I don't think we do ratings on these, do we? I don't think we do. We've done a couple of them. We don't rate them.
All right. Westerns. Maybe next time we'll do.
Yeah, and like I said, I need to get out and expand my Western viewing, but they're making good modern Westerns. You just gotta be on the lookout for them.
So maybe next time we'll do a martial arts movie.
Don't tease now.
Where can the people find you, Brian?
Oh, you know me. You can find me at Hurstgillies on Twitter, saying things, and then when the whole internet kicks me in the dick, just doubling down because I love the attention.
I don't know when this is gonna come out, but I bet everybody knows what you're talking about.
It could be anything. You can say that every day. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a specific thing.
Yeah, you can find us here, Flyover Sale Film. We have another podcast. It's been like an hour and a half long. We do topics. We do a movie. There's 2 other penises, like I mentioned. We have a lot of fun over there. Go watch
like
us.
This, but there's more jokes, I guess, because we do.
I do more jokes there because I can make fun of TJ or Joe. Flyover Sale Fear, mentioning Joe. He has a horror-centric podcast. He has a lot of good guests. Me and
to try hard, had to go out and start his little,
Yeah.
Ooh, I got a side project now. I'm gonna bring back the DVD bunker out of spite. I keep saying it, but I'm gonna do it.
I'll edit it. And bye.
Peace.
I'm gonna have to keep your firing guns now.